Hey now, and welcome to episode 38 of the Help Find the Others podcast. If this is your first time listening to us, well, welcome. But if you've been here all along, welcome back. I'm your host, Ruben. And as always, Stan is on the line. How you doing, man?
Doing great, buddy.
Yeah, so this episode, our guest was Nate from Profound Shifts, who had interviewed me. I don't know, did you look up how long ago that was? It was probably a lot longer ago than it feels.
Yeah, that's a good question. I want to say probably maybe like somewhere in the range of 4 to 6 months, if I had to guess.
Yeah. So we'll put a link to his YouTube channel, but Nate interviewed me on his channel, and I told him that I would, return the favor and have him guest on the podcast, and so we're just getting around to it now. But I think it turned out to be a great interview.
Yeah.
When he interviewed me, he had a list of questions and stuff like that, so I kind of knew where the conversation was going to go. But obviously, in the style of this podcast, we didn't have anything planned, and I don't know. It felt like it flowed pretty good. Do you think so?
Yeah, no, it definitely did, and I don't know. I've been listening to some of the older episodes and kind of getting caught up on the idea that we're repeating a lot of the same information. It's kind of hard to always say new things when it's focused on one topic. And it was cool that I thought we branched out with this guest, and there was a lot of new topics that we talked about that we haven't up until this point.
Yeah. I kind of felt that too. So, hopefully you guys enjoy this episode, but here's Nate. So, Nate, man, thanks for coming on. I know you interviewed me on your channel a little bit ago, and I wanted to return the favor, so thanks for coming on, man.
Definitely. I've been stoked to come on here since we had that conversation and since I came across your channel. So I'm jacked to be here and talking to you guys and sharing my story with the audience.
Yeah, no, it's great. And so I guess let's start, just kind of talk about your YouTube channel and like specifically too, like kind of like what led you to that? What was your like what was the moment where you felt like a calling to make a channel like you have?
Yeah. Okay. So, man, this would go back to like 2004, somewhere in there. Like when YouTube really started becoming a thing. Like I remember watching all these conspiracy videos and all this stuff, and it was like a whole nother layer of reality was like revealed to me. Other than, what we were taught in school and, just what we learned growing up. And so I started reading about, like aliens and other planets and secret technologies and the like hidden effects of the government and flaws in the educational system and how it's all been engineered. And I got lost in this whole world of like this other realm of conspiracy theories and all this kind of stuff. And there was a part of me at that time, like I felt like, if you've ever looked into like the new age stuff and they talk about like an ascension and how, the planet is waking up to a new reality. And then there's all kinds of stuff about moving into 5D from the 3D. And like, I just got so lost in all that stuff where it's almost like when you're having an intense trip, like you kind of feel like you lose yourself. And I kind of felt like I lost myself for a while, but during all that, like I had this calling where I was like, I want to help humanity. Like I want to help humanity wake up. Like I want to help us basically attain freedom. And I didn't know what the hell that looked like. Like, but I just knew that, like it seemed like a YouTube channel was the way to go. I mean, that's how to reach a lot of people. And so I mean, that was when I was just out of high school and, day-to-day stuff. And then the fear of putting myself out there in front of people. And next thing 10 years went by and, started a family and, built and lost a couple of businesses, and life all happened. And all of a sudden, like, I woke up one day and I was like, shit, like if I don't do this now, I'm never going to do it. And, yeah, so that's when I started the channel, and I was like, first I'll just kind of start with like basic stuff, and then maybe someday I can start talking about the wild and wacky world, and move into that realm. But right now, like, my focus is just on trying to help people like live happier, healthier lives by like building vitality and vibrancy, and my main focus is mental health, because I've maybe we can get into that, but I've watched my family fall apart. I mean, I've 3 very close family members have suffered at the hands of mental illness. And, seeing that, I had my own concerns about myself, ultimately, I realized. And so mental health has been a huge thing. And so I've been really focused on, like, what does a person need to do inside of their lives to build mental health and maintain mental health for the purpose of just enjoying our lives more. Because I think, anxiety, depression, all those things that affect so many of us, I think that they can be lightened, like the load can be lessened by making different choices inside of our lives, like from food choices to maintaining discipline, and, how we move our bodies with exercise. So, yeah, I mean, not to get too far off, but that's kind of my story and why I got into my channel.
Yeah, man. I mean, and it's so similar to, the forces that led me to start my channel too. So, I mean, it's no surprise to me that we've crossed paths, but I think what's funny though is like the mental health and wellness kind of stuff that is a crossover between our 2 channels is more like the direction it's like just taken me as going. Like, I definitely started my channel wanting to wake people up, except I think when I started it, my initial thought was like, but the way to do that is only with psychedelic drugs, like I was like, that was the only intention I had. And then with talking with, I wanted to help find the others, and with talking with the others, it's like, it's formed this whole, like, there's a holistic approach to mental health and wellness that, yes, it involves psychedelic drugs, and they're a great way to, they're a great medicine to use instead of the synthetic stuff that humans have concocted, that nature already had the medicine available for mental health and wellness, but that there's a whole host of other things. And, and we talk about that just as much, with meditation and yoga and exercise and diet and, all the stuff we talk about. But I think like the overall like net gain of all the stuff we talk about is mental health and wellness improvement, and so like, I think that's really cool to hear that that's, a main focus of your channel.
Yeah. What's funny, man, is like, I didn't recognize it. Like, I knew that it was a thing. Like, I knew that was like, it was a huge part of my life, but it had such a profound impact on my life. And it was like around me so much. Like, I felt the stigmatism of even talking about it. Like, I didn't even want to bring it up because I was still so lost inside of it. And so it wasn't until real recently that I've gotten to a point where I'm like, you know what? I think I'm ready to talk about this and share my story in front of people. And I think the more people out here that are doing this and sharing it, like, hey, mental health is a real thing. Like, there's so many people out there. There's so many of us that are dealing with it at one level or another, and we may not even like realize it. Like, for a long time, I didn't even realize that I had an issue with mental health. And I remember I went to this class for neuro-linguistic programming. It's for those of you who don't know what that is, it's a group of psychological tools that have been developed over, like the last 100 years that are the most effective for creating change subconsciously, and changing our behaviors and patterns inside of our lives, like at the most rapid. And so the people that are like really good at performing neurolinguistic programming, like they can help somebody like lose their fear of snakes, or like those kinds of behavioral things. Like they can help them shift those kinds of things like within an hour. So phobias, anxieties, that kind of stuff. And so I was like, yeah, I really got interested in how to do that. And I was sitting there in the class, and it was the first day, and the teacher was bringing everybody up, and we're introducing ourselves, to the rest of the class. And so I was sharing a little bit of my story. Like I watched my brother descend into paranoid schizophrenia. I watched my mom lose touch with reality after her bout with, fibromyalgia and chronic pain and a botched surgery and pills. And I watched my uncle, he lived on the property with us, like with alcoholism, and ultimately ended his life in front of me. And I knew I needed to, I wanted to help people heal. And I was sitting there telling the story, and the teacher looked at me, and her question in front of the whole class was, are you worried about, your mental health? And up until that point, I had never thought about it. Like I'd never even crossed my mind. And so I just kind of answered her nonchalantly. I was like, no. And then I've been thinking about that question ever since. And I realized, like, yeah, I was definitely worried about it. And that's what's launched me on this whole journey of, trying to understand, what does it take for somebody to heal themselves? I mean, do we really need to be popping these pills that the doctors are prescribing to support these pharmaceutical companies? Or like, can we take the responsibility of healing ourselves through alternative methods? And like you're saying, Ruben, like, is that through psychedelics, or is it through meditation, or is it through yoga? And I think that like each one of us are like individuals, so we all have our own path to it. There's all kinds of ways. And like diving into that world is fascinating. I love it. I love seeing what everybody is using and trying. Yeah. So, and that's how I ended up finding you, man. Is because like I played with psychedelics when I was in high school, and at that point in time, it was just more like let's see some colors and some walls move. Yeah. But and then as like time went on, it was like, oh yeah. Like I want to like unlock these fear patterns that I have inside of my mind, or the things that are holding me back. Like I want to be able to achieve more, to present like a bolder self to the public. I want to be able like be less socially awkward. And so I started looking at like people who'd done heroic doses, and I came across your epic video, man. And it was like I was like sitting there like rooting it on, because I had just gone through the same thing. So anybody in the audience right now, if you saw that video, like drop a comment or hit that thumbs up button, because that was epic. I'm guessing that's probably what brought a lot of us to you.
Yeah. I mean, for sure that video, I mean, still gets, a couple hundred views a week or something. I don't know. I mean, it's like every time I look, it's more, and I'm like, wow, okay. But yeah, I mean, I think, and that when I started this channel, like I was right. And this is all the guests, all the people that have joined our Discord, everyone has helped me kind of form a more clear vision of not only, the mission of this help find the others, channel and podcast and stuff. Not only help form that, but help form my own views on my life, and it's been, all of this stuff has been a form of therapy, in itself, just talking into a microphone or talking into a camera, to the point that it's improved my, mental health. It's helped me integrate that trip that I was obviously very confused about. So anyone that's been along for the ride and resonates with me, obviously it's been helping them as well. And it's just like a train that just keeps rolling and picking up passengers along the way,
Dude, that is so cool. That is so cool. Well, and something that we talked about in the last podcast that we did together is, like the fact that like, I think a lot of the audience, like has kids or they're moving into like a different phase of life. And it's not just about, like the fun aspects anymore, but it's like trying to integrate this life and like be able to move forward as a responsible family member or, parent or whatever the case may be. I think that's awesome, bringing so many people together with a similar mission.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's been really cool too, seeing, and I don't know if you've seen this with the people that message you and everything is like, and one reason, the last statement I just made, that like, anyone that's been along with the ride has improved as well. Well, like I actually know that to be true just from the emails I get and then, the people that, while I may not have met anyone in real life, through our Discord server and stuff like that, I feel like they're friends as much as any other internet friend you may have, and just seeing the progress in everybody's lives and how they're bettering and they're happier and, just feel maybe a little less confused, if that's possible. But, like it's like, I've seen that progression just in, the people that are part of the community, and I don't know, it's just really cool,
What is it that you think is it about the channel that is helping, the people the most? Like, is it hearing other people's stories about their trips, or is it like, like them realizing that there's so many other people that are like them on the same journey, or what is it that you've seen?
Yeah, I think it's more that, I mean, there's all sorts of different people, obviously, but I think like the overriding thing that I get in emails and guests and stuff like that is like their friends and family aren't into at least the psychedelic aspect, like that. They're just like, it's just a drug. They don't get it. They don't get that part,
Yeah.
But then
I totally get that.
Yeah. But then a lot of people just aren't, their parents are one political party and they're another, and they don't, nobody sees eye to eye with them and stuff like that. And like they live in, the middle of nowhere where everyone doesn't think the same as them and whatever. And they're just drawn to a community of people that talk about, time travel or, whatever, even if it's just that, like, even if it's just like, there's no one to talk about weird sci-fi shit with, like, we have a Discord that people get on there and spend all day talking about that, so, it's more that it's like a virtual, social media, basically, like of like-minded people. Like, there's no trolls, there's no, your Aunt Sheila isn't going to read what you're writing and and tell your mom that you're on drugs and, whatever. Like, it's just shit like that like, that's the biggest thing is like, there's so many, and so many people are like, they did drugs when they were teens and then they're in their 30s now. And then they got back into it. Like, that's like an overriding theme as well,
Huh. That's intense. And we all probably, in our teens, we all did it for the same reason. Like, let's see how twisted we can get our consciousness.
Yeah.
And then coming into it now is like a totally different ballgame. And like, I dig what you're saying though, is it's like, it kind of goes along with the whole idea of experimenting with psychedelics as we get into these later stages in life. Is like opening our minds to different possibilities and different patterns of thinking, and like a whole new realm of looking at life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then having other people that are like right there with you, that's so valuable. Because I like in my normal life, I'm trying to think if there's one person that I know that like I can talk about, that kind of stuff with, but otherwise, like what you're saying, like, no, can't talk to, parentals. They don't get it.
Yeah. And it's funny because it's not even just the psychedelic aspect. Like, I mean, I'm an example, but I've talked to several others, that have contacted me or on our Discord server where like, yeah, their wife does psychedelics with them, but it's like they can't talk about Ascension and 5D with her, like she's like, whatever, like that, like, so that's where I'm at too. It's like, it's not like I only do psychedelics by myself and don't talk about it with anyone around me, but it's like the people I do them with, or the people I do talk about them with, they, haven't woken up enough, or they're not, I don't know. Like, I don't know what the reason is for them, but it's just that the kind of conversations we have, I don't know a lot of people in person that I can have those conversations with, even if I'm comfortable having them. It's just that, like, nobody can carry the conversation with me. Like, it just turns into me lecturing about stuff that is over their head and they think is woo woo,
which is always cool, man. Like, I love listening to your videos where you're just going off on some subject, because every time I walk away with something.
Yeah.
Every time.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. You should hear me talk to my kids, because I talk to them kind of the same way. Like, like, so yeah, I mean, you mentioned the Ascension 5D stuff, and like, I've been listening to a lot of podcasts with the comedian Jessa Reed. Have you heard of her?
No.
You might want to check her out.
I just wrote her name down though.
Yeah. She had like a viral video on that. So This Is Happening, comedy thing, Comedy Central segment they have on YouTube. And so her thing was, she used to be a meth addict, and she came up with an idea that you could drink your pee, because you pee out meth because your body doesn't do anything with it. And so that's what her story was. And it's got millions of views as this comedy bit. So she started doing kind of the, comedy, C-level comedian circuit and doing podcasts and stuff like that. Well, then when she would get on like weird podcasts, she would kind of let her guard down and talk, about what's really going on. And so she had like a near-death experience, and then has been talking to aliens ever since. And she talks about like all this like 5D, 6D, 8D Ascension stuff, but apparently, and I mean, she could be full of shit, because it's kind of what's giving her like juice right now. Like, she didn't read about any of this. This is just what aliens have been telling her. But she uses all the same terminology as other people that, wrote books on this and everything. So like, I agree with a lot of like what she's saying, but like, I would phrase it differently. I wouldn't use the same terminology. But anyway, like, I was listening to that podcast, and my son was like, what the hell are you listening to? Like, he was in the back just like, on his phone or whatever. And he was like, what is she talking about? She talks to aliens. And like, I just totally like matter-of-factly like explained to him a lot of the stuff about like levels of consciousness. And like, I mean, he had a couple pretty good questions. Like, he was listening, but it did definitely get to a point where like his eyes just glazed over. And he was like, whatever, I'm going to go back to watching stuff about Fortnite. But, but like, how, how are you with your own kids, like, and discussing like spirituality, basically?
I'm trying to figure out how to present this. So like, I have two kids. I have a son and a daughter. My son is just about, he turns 6 in a month, and then my daughter is 4. And so like, I haven't talked about, I mean, I've talked about other worlds, and like, maybe there's other people living out there, flying in space, and like, so I've kind of talked to him about that kind of stuff. And then I've tried to relate to him the idea that there's something bigger, like more than just who we are. Like, are they just their bodies, or is there something more to them than just their bodies? And I'd like to think that some of it is like hitting home a little bit. For the most part, they kind of look at me for a second and then start talking about the toy that's laying on the floor in front of them. So like, I try. I think I'm still a couple of years from really getting there. But I hear a lot of like the conscious parenting and helping kids see like this, that there's more to this world, and I definitely want to do that. It's I don't know, it's kind of like walking a tightrope, like, because I don't want to like overburden them with that kind of stuff, because they're just really not that interested. I think they're more interested in what they're going to be doing next, or the next toy that they're playing with. But it's an evolving process. I'm learning probably just as much or more than they are right now in this whole thing.
Yeah. No, I watch like Rick and Morty with my son and stuff. Like I because one thing I like about Rick and Morty is like they approach all these weirdo topics that really kind of question reality and space and time and spirituality and all that, and humanity in general. But they do it in a tongue-in-cheek way, which is honestly the only way to do that, because if you start trying to approach investigating those topics seriously, like, it gets pretty scary. And so like, yeah, like, that's the thing, like, that overwhelms kids, that makes them anxious, and stuff like that. So like, to approach it in a joking way. And then my son will always be like, is that like really what happens or whatever, or whatever? Like, yeah, I'll be like, I don't know. It's funny if it does, right? Like, if that's what it is. And then if it isn't, well, who cares? And that's just a joke, So like, I think that's a very good show. Now, depends on the age of your kids and how much people like to, have their kids see, and language they like to hear and stuff like that. Like, the show is obviously made for adults, and it swears and it has blood and guts and terrible things happen. But I don't know.
It's hilarious.
It's hilarious. And, I don't know if it's woke parenting or not, but like, I don't give a shit if my kid sees that kind of stuff, So, so it's a great show for that, because it does like bring up some interesting questions that they'll have about, time and space and dimensions and reality and all that stuff that, like, I don't know, kids should be part of the question, should be part of the group asking the questions about those things. We should have the kids' perspective going into that debate of reality,
Oh, totally. Especially because I think kids are they don't have like these solid like belief structures. It's like I hesitate to venture into this world and this conversation, but I guess like when it comes to some people in religion, it's like they have these very strict, belief structures, and it's like if you so much as take a chip out of a wall of one of those belief structures, like you damage the whole program. So like they can't let anything in. But when you're talking with kids, like they don't have all of those solid walls put up around their beliefs. Like they're open to, it's not like they have to accept or anything that's said, but they entertain the possibilities. And just like what you said about your son, like he was asking good questions. That's what it's all about. Like asking questions and getting that different perspective. Like I remember when I first started reading about alien civilizations interacting with the human species and looking at like historical sites and the evidence of all that, dude, my worldview changed so radically. Like all of a sudden it was like everything just came crumbling down, and it was like, what is going on? Like really, like what the hell's the purpose of this place? And I wish I would have started learning about that stuff or approaching it at a younger age, because it probably wouldn't have rocked my world so hard.
Yeah. It's parenting and religion and spirituality is hard, because like, for me personally, like I'm Jewish. I consider myself of the Jewish culture. I obviously don't believe that, Abraham was this dude who did this shit and whatever. I don't believe like biblical stories as a history book, but I believe that they're like good morals for like living a good life and stuff like that. And I think that all the war and fights over religions are all just like getting hung up on details of a scripture of some sort that who knows who wrote it and when it was retranslated and all of that. But I do see benefit, not to everybody, but to some people, and a lot of people, obviously, the culture that religion provides. And so I raise my kids for that, and I take that very seriously, like celebrating Hanukkah and Jewish holidays, and having bar mitzvahs and all the traditions of Judaism. My kids go to Sunday school, and my older son is going to Hebrew school to prepare for his bar mitzvah in a couple years and stuff like that. And I take all that very seriously. But my son definitely knows that if he has some sort of question about the beliefs of Judaism, like say he's working on something for Sunday school, like a presentation he has to do, like he shouldn't ask me, because I'm going to give him some question that, or some answer that, he's like, okay, whatever, I'll ask mom, because it'll be way over his head and involve spaceships. And, so he's already figured that out, but it sucks because, well, like you said about, there's people that are very like, I guess triggered would, be the word I would use, that like, if you put any sort of chink in the armor of belief that they've built up based on a certain religion, and then they're very defensive and offended by anything questioning that belief. I think the same can be said for people that fall out of belief of religion, in that because something happened that shook them out of their belief, whatever direction they go from there, whether it's an atheist or some other religion, they are so like against religion at that point, especially like
closed off.
Right. Yeah. Like I have several friends who are like, they're more of a confirmed atheist than most people are, sure about their, if they're a vegan or something like that. Like they will like tell, while they're at the urinal with someone, they'll be like, hey, by the way, I'm an atheist, like they're that much into being an atheist that like, I've had debates with them where I'm like, dude, I know from being friends with you that you used to be very Catholic, and now you're way more atheist than you were Catholic. And to me, it seems like you're so anti-spiritual because of what shook you out of your Catholic beliefs, and so that's what I like about the psychedelic component to the mental and health and wellness, like we were talking about. The psychedelic component like kind of reintroduces spirituality into people that may not have the religious belief.
Yes, definitely.
Like, cause like what is religious belief other than a belief in a higher power? Well, how can you cram 5 grams of mushrooms down your throat and not believe in a higher power?
Gotta believe in something.
Yeah.
Yeah. I in reference to what you're saying, what I've seen a lot is children of parents who were like dogmatic about the religion. It seems like the children of those kinds of parents, the ones that like cram it down their throat, I mean, completely, it seems like they're the ones that revolt against it. Like I know I have a couple of family members who were raised in homes where that was the case. And like today, they don't want to hear anything about spirituality because you even mention anything about that and they instantly tie it back to what they experienced, as a kid. And they're just like, nope, don't want any part of it.
Yeah.
And maybe someday they'll have an experience where they can reconnect to, that higher power, like what you're talking about, because that's ultimately what it comes down to. And then like you're saying, getting the moral principles and the guidance and these systems that have been put into place for thousands of years. Like there's parts of religion that I love, because it kind of gives us like a pathway or a tool to finding. I mean, as we get older, I think it's pretty common for us all to struggle with like how do we feel fulfilled, or feel more peace inside of our lives. And I think that in a lot of cases, religion helps us discover that. And that, I mean, man, that's so valuable. That's so valuable when you're feeling lost. I was speaking about, like that experience of not being connected to religion. That's kind of the way I was growing up. Like my parents were in the Worldwide Church of God when I was a kid, and like that whole thing blew up and went sideways, and found out it was, what they were involved with was more of a cult. And so that kind of like all fell apart when I was pretty young. But so I grew up not in my, like younger years, I guess, like not part of anything religious. So I didn't really have any faith. I didn't have any connection to anything. But this is pretty interesting, is that like in this time frame where I kind of started discovering that there was like this whole other reality out there. It was 2010, and I was sitting at home playing Diablo on my computer, and my girlfriend at the time, she was gone, so I was just home alone, and I had all of a sudden like this kind of like electrical buzzing in the back of my head, and it was pretty intense. Like it was strong. And I stopped playing the video games, and I kind of sat back, and this electrical buzzing in the back of my head turned into like this full blown spontaneous mystical experience. And at the time I didn't know what the heck was happening, but like it was like an intense acid trip without any acid. Like I just all of a sudden felt connected to something so much bigger, and it was like it was on such a deep level where it's like all of this brief moment I had this understanding. So I was like completely like just felt like this total love and acceptance, and along with that like this intense like electrical pulsing in the back of my head and down my spine. And it was such an overwhelming experience of love. I don't know what else to say. Like, man, I'm not a crier, but tears were just streaming down my face. Yeah. And I mean, from that moment, I haven't had any question about that there is life beyond this. Like it was, and I know that that's something like I can tell this story, and for anybody who's listening, like they're, you have your own beliefs and your own experiences, and I'm not trying to like push anything, but like for me now, it's like I have this just real connection to like, it's a knowing inside that there is something beyond this. And so like when I look at religions, I see beauty in every single one of them. What frustrates me is when they're abused and used as control mechanisms to, guide and influence people. Take advantage of them. That's what drives me nuts.
Well, and what sucks, and this is the biggest thing that I find when arguing with like atheists, the biggest thing I find with their biggest gripe on religions is that gray area. And this is the part that sucks about religions, the gray area where religions become politics and government. And what sucks is on the others, there's good things about politics, and well, maybe not politics, but there's good things about government. But there's the gray area where they become religion, and that involves politics. Like what is a political party other than a religion, honestly? And that's how it's become in this country, and it's disgusting. And religion follows that same thing. The Vatican with Catholicism is a government. It's not a fucking spiritual guide, like, I mean, unless you totally believe in like sin and hell and, you know, their thing, and believe what they dictate about what is going to, you know, define those things, that's always changing according to the politics of that government agency that is a spiritual guide. You know, it's like this gray area where it's like it all kind of, religion lends itself to, you know, and I don't know if it's just because people are looking for an answer because life is so confusing or whatever, but it lends itself to being vulnerable to the same thing that government and politics do. And that leaves such a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. You know, the money involved in religion and the, you know, hypocrisy of the religious figures, stuff like that. Like, it leaves such a bad taste that unfortunately it overrides the good things that people could get out of religion and spirituality.
Totally. Yeah. And you know, it's like, man, it's like it's when the natural curiosity and craving inside of people for something bigger, you know, than them, when religion is able to give them just a taste of it, like just enough to where they stay in that circle, and then they're able to influence. You know, when you were talking there, I'd never really, you know, I've always heard the separation of church and state, but I'd never really considered like Catholicism and the Vatican as a government power. But you kind of just opened my eyes to that, man. Like,
well, yeah, I mean, I always say, like, there is no separation of church and state, because in a lot of ways the church is a state, and in a lot of ways the state is a church. You know, I mean, it's like they're the same thing. And you, like, for as much as people want either of those institutions to represent their beliefs, you know, how many people support one politician that totally undermines the beliefs of their religion that they support? You know, like, you see that all the time. And so that's why, like, they just become intertwined, you know. And I think, like, a lot of that, at least from the religion side, comes from people wanting guidance and answers, you know. And we've gotten so far down this, like, you know, most major religions have become so corrupted by the money involved in it, because at some point, some spiritual, you know, your spiritual guide was a shaman, you know, dancing in the moonlight, right? And then at some point, there became more and more people watching him. He's like, I'm gonna charge money for these people to watch me dance in the moonlight, and you know, and then down the road, you have, you know, the Pope speaking about poverty from a gilded palace, you know.
Yep.
And
along the way, we forgot about the actual spiritual part of spirituality.
Right. We forgot why that guy was dancing in the moonlight, because we're financially involved at that point, you know.
Well, yeah, and not to get off track, but, you know, like, when it comes to the financially involved part, I think we're seeing more and more, like, I don't know where to stand on this, man, because, like, I mean, there's a part of me that sees, you know, money is a necessary part of this world, an exchange of energy, but the corruption that it has caused, like, within the medical system, yeah, where they profit from people being sick, which encourages them to keep people sick over and over and over again, like, and that's repeated throughout almost every system, the educational system, the prison system. I mean, all the way along, like, money has corrupted. I don't know if you can say money is corrupted or the people who amass a large amount of it have corrupted. I don't know how to, you know, where's right and wrong in that situation. But, like, I think we're reaching a point, like, where as a species, it's time that we evolve to a whole nother level as to how we utilize, you know, our exchange of energy, because it's gotten nuts. Yeah. I just can't believe how many people are sick, and how, like, when people are searching for wellness today, like, going back to the mental illness aspect, like, they try to go into you go seek help, and they're prescribed a pill, And I don't think that there are very many doctors inside of Western medicine where they'll talk to the person about diet and the relationship of, an imbalance of minerals inside of their bodies can cause, aggression or depression or whatever. And so like we have to figure out a way how to get back to the root core of like taking personal responsibility, personal sovereignty, and the fact that like we can create wellness. And I think that, part of that is tying back into this, this spiritual aspect of, like that we truly are divine beings. And, when that power is taken away from us and we're told that we have to go through somebody else in order to find out what spirit wants from us, or that, God will only love us if, we do whatever, the person, the authority figure tells us is acceptable.
Yeah.
Oh man, like that's so disempowering. And it's no wonder there's so many people that are suffering today, and there's so many people taking advantage of us.
Yeah. Well, I think, as far as the financial aspect, the term you just used is perfect of disempowering, is that, the way inflation works and the way like the economy is set up, we're fat and happy slaves. We don't realize we're slaves, but like the American dream has been stolen. And, we think we're fine because we have a job and record unemployment and blah, 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 or, record employment, record low unemployment, and all this stuff. But like wages are low and, retail investment in the economy is at an all time low and stuff like that. Like we have a fake economy. So we're like kind of in a gilded cage almost. Most Americans, have more than they need. Don't get me wrong, but they aren't free. And that goes back to what, you started your channel for, what I started my channel for, to wake people up so that they can be free. And it all goes, and I think that's why religion is able to do what it does. That's why politics are able to do what they do. It's why the medical industry is able to keep us handcuffed with insurance companies and stuff like that. It all goes back to the way they keep people enslaved in that is by convincing everyone that every other option sucks more, that it's worse. And, look at our country, right? Like we're one of the only fucking developed nations that doesn't have universal healthcare that's paid through the taxes. We also have the largest military budget that we pay through our taxes, as the top, like the next 5 countries combined, so we're paying just as much taxes. It's just instead of getting healthcare, we're getting military industrial contracts, and which is great. I feel super safe. I don't know about you guys, but like, it's like whatever, like, and at the same time, the Pentagon loses $300 billion a year and no one cares about it. So like we're just convinced that there's no other way, that the American way is the best way. The American healthcare system is the best. And if anyone, puts up any stats to kind of question that notion, you're un-American, you're an asshole, you're a hippie or whatever. And so it all goes back to like kind of this universal lesson, that, the allegory of the cave, of like, what I'm talking about? Like where like,
that was like Plato or Aristotle or something.
Yeah. Where, people are born in chains looking at this wall with shadows from people behind them going past the fire. And that's the world. And they're convinced that like, if you leave, like there's nothing else but that. There's no better option, but this is reality, maybe a better, more modern representation of that same lesson is the M. Night Shyamalan movie, The Village, where they think there's, if you go past the woods, there's a werewolf and like, you can't leave, like you'll die or whatever, and it isn't until there's like real trouble that they, someone gets out and is like, wait a minute, this is all bullshit, and I guess it's more the viewer that realizes that, but still like, it's that idea of like, you could be scared to think that you're the safest you can be. You're in the best economy there can be, in the best government there can be. But like, until you wake up, until you start having a profound shift in your consciousness, like you don't really realize it. You can read books, you can do all this, but until you like start experiencing stuff other than the program that's being sold to you, you're a slave, it doesn't matter how much money you make and how free you might think you are. If you're not free to think, you're not free.
Yeah, definitely. And they've definitely put in chains around that. Something that you just touched on that I think is so huge, and this has really been a big theme for me over the last about month, is how important perspective is. Like how perspective influences everything inside of our lives.
Yeah.
And that actually goes back to neurolinguistic programming. One of the big tools that they have is for perspective shifts, and the realizations that we can have. And so like you were just talking about this perspective of, like looking at the shadows on the wall and thinking that's it. And then if you kind of back out and look at it from a more distant perspective, you see something else. And I think that has to do with spirituality. Like I think that perspective, and this may sound kind of dumb, but like perspective can actually tie us into a greater sense of spirituality. And what I mean by that is like what a lot of the great spiritual teachers talk about is to recognize, the awareness of the person that you think you are. So like when you're sitting there and you're meditating and you're involved inside, your mind is running through all the thoughts like, I have to pay this bill, and oh, so-and-so's mad at me. When I get done with this, I got to run and get this grocery or whatever. Like when you're able to quiet that part out, and then you're able to shift your awareness so that you are like aware, like who is it that is aware of the mind that is thinking. And if a person can get their mind to that point and shift their perspective, suddenly like we see the events in our lives from a completely different place where they don't carry as much of an emotional charge. And so we're able to deal with those things from a much more grounded perspective. As an example, like when I was sitting in that class and we were going really in depth into this stuff, the teacher was guiding us through this, walking us through this process of shifting our perspectives. And I witnessed myself in my role with my uncle before he ended his life. And when I shifted my perspective and I looked at myself, like suddenly I saw where I could have handled things differently, where I was just as emotionally charged and reactive inside those situations as he was. And during that time, like I was coming from this place of, holier than thou and all that kind of crap. And man, like I wish I could go back and change it. I can't now, but one of the biggest things that I took away from that whole thing is like, he was one of my greatest teachers in my life. And it's unfortunate the way that things played out for him and his family. Like that's a total understatement, but I am eternally grateful for, what he taught me and allowing me to see how the perspectives that we have, like we can shift our perspective wherever we're at. And it's all through just like simple mechanics of mind, just by like literally, like if you're sitting there and you're imagining yourself while you're meditating, if you see like yourself sitting in a chair, and you zoom out even farther and you see the city that you're in, and you zoom out even farther and all of a sudden like you see like the timeline of your life. If you can do that visualization, like, and you can travel forward and back, like it all just sounds like imagination, but as far as the mechanics of how our brain works, like we can access our subconscious thoughts and feelings, and we can look at look at the areas of our life and shift our perspectives of those things, and we can heal like these old traumas and these old wounds and these things that we carry around inside of ourselves, where like maybe subconsciously we beat ourselves up because we did something when we were younger that we feel guilty about. Like we took cookies from our sibling or something like that, but if we can access that stuff and repair it and change it through perspective, like I've just come to this place where like I just realize like perspective is everything.
Oh,
it's super simplistic, but it's so powerful.
Yeah, I mean, right before I started my YouTube channel, maybe like 6 months before that, actually, I started going to therapy, and I did a year of therapy, and it was the first time I had ever been to a counselor or any, a therapist. And what's funny, I don't know if you've heard any of my other episodes or anything where I talk about it, but like my mom was a psychologist, my sister's a school psychologist, my brother's a school psychologist, his ex-wife is a school psychologist, my uncle is a psychiatrist, and my aunt is a psychiatric nurse. Like, it's like, I've just been surrounded by mental health professionals my whole life, and just always been under the idea of like, well, I don't need therapy. I've been surrounded by therapists my whole life, blah, 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 and so it took me, 35 years or whatever to be like, yeah, I need therapy, like these fuckers fucked me up. Like, that was actually a bad situation to be around that much mental health professionals. But one of the biggest things, that my therapist hammered into me was that like reality is all your perspective, and that like it's, the mantra of like positive thinking is like, a, and the law of attraction and all these things like use different terminology to get to the point that like you draw towards you whatever you're focusing on. That's just the way the universe works. And that like if you are convinced and all you think about is that bad shit happens to you, like you draw that towards you, and the more you convince yourself that good shit doesn't happen to you, you're also focusing on that and you're pushing it away from you. And it's like a mixture of understanding that component of the universe and being aware, like you said, of your perspective, and refocusing your perspective as many times as you need to, and being okay with that. That could be an infinite amount of times, is like kind of the key to just like getting through, and like, the other real important thing is to not only be aware of your own perspective, but be aware of other people's perspectives. Because like so much of life and anxiety and depression, if it's not directed at yourself, it's directed at the actions of others. Well, you're going to be condemned to being confused about other people's actions and beliefs or whatever, if you have no awareness of their perspective.
Yeah.
And
that's definitely something that I have struggled, or I wasn't even aware of, is getting on another person's map. Like, I was so consumed with my own world and my own thoughts, and that's something, somebody said to me one time, I can't remember where, like if it was a movie or if somebody said it, but the anxiety that we feel when we're talking to people or we're in front of people, is said, don't even worry about it. Like, everybody's so consumed with their own world and their themselves, they're not thinking about you. Like honestly, you don't matter as much as you think you do. And I remember when I heard that, I was like, shit. That was like, if I could remember that when I was talking, that changed my whole world. Because man, social anxiety used to be huge for me. That was massive.
Yeah, no, for me too. I mean, and like that's one of the biggest components of my psyche that like I have to constantly be aware of, is like, it's this story I've written for myself of like, I'm socially anxious, I don't like talking to people. But it's like, but then if I like kind of stop and am aware of like the reality of a situation, I'm like, wait, I always end up talking to someone at a party, like, or whatever. Like, even if it's just about fantasy football or hockey or something, like I end up talking to someone. It's not like I go sit in the corner. Like there's, and it's not like I convince myself just to not even go, like there's social anxiety that gets to that point, right? Where like, you're just, agoraphobic or whatever. A lot of times I have to like stop, and whether it's through meditation or anything like that, be like, wait a minute. Okay. That's your old story. That's your old timeline, like you're not that way. Like you're fine.
Yeah. Yeah, you know what I find funny, man, is that two guys who struggle with social anxiety are now making podcasts and YouTube videos.
Yeah,
where we get in front of a bunch of people and talk. That's kind of funny.
Well, and I think, well, and what's funny is like, I've been a musician most of my life too. Like I've never had stage fright. I can get up and sing a song or play a song or whatever, and I'm fine. And I could even get up, and if I had like, a speech prepared or something like that, like I don't have public speaking, everyone paying attention to me, social anxiety. It's like social interaction that gives me anxiety, like going in and introducing yourself and being like, oh, I know that person. Cause it's like, I don't know, that's weird. Like it's like small talk that gives me anxiety. But like having all eyes on me, while I'm not like someone that craves that, like I'm not, always looking for attention. And that's obvious, definitely not why I started a YouTube channel. It's like, I don't know, there's a shield there, like it's either there's the shield with YouTube of a computer and a camera and whatever, and you're not actually present with people or whatever. But even in a situation where you're in real life in front of people, there's that shield of the stage, or, I guess the wall, like Roger Waters, kind of was describing in that whole album. But there's something like that. It's the actual, like, I don't know, the actual social interaction that tends to give me anxiety, and that I have to always be aware of and adjust my perspective with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Something that you were talking about a little bit ago is you're talking about how what we focus on, is what we end up, experiencing inside of our life. And if we're focused on, the bad shit that's always happening. And a thought came to me when you were talking about that. You were saying that, well, it's like a lot of times when we're going through that, like we don't even realize that we think that bad things happen to us. Like we may wonder why does it seem like that's always happening? And probably most of your audience is probably already on the page, because I know that there are a lot of smart people on here. But the power of the subconscious, and that's probably why one of the most powerful things of why people start playing with psychedelics, or maybe it's one of the things that people have heard, is the power of psychedelics to help us rewrite our subconscious and to release those things like social anxiety, that may have developed from, a speech, or when you had to stand up in third grade and talk to a room full of students, and somebody laughed at you, or somebody, called us out and in front of everybody and made us feel bad, and your subconscious like, hey, that's dangerous, because like social ridicule is one of the, as far as when we look at our evolution, like if you were kicked out of the tribe, 100,000 years ago, like you're dead meat. You're not going to survive on your own. And so like, I think, as on a mechanistic level, that social, what's the word? Ostracism? I can't remember what that word is. Ostracize.
Ostracize.
Yep. Yeah. So when you're ostracized, like that's a fundamental core fear that's tied to death. And so like when we can use, psychedelics in a healthy way in a setting to like reprogram ourselves so that we can lose that response, that fear response. That's what gets me so jacked about psychedelics and the possibilities. Have you guys heard anything else on like this train of legalization that's happening? Because I know it happened was it Oakland and someplace in Colorado? Are you guys aware of any of that?
Yeah, I know of Oakland and Denver. But I guess I haven't really been paying attention other than that. I want to say Chicago decriminalized mushrooms.
Really?
I'm not positive on that though. I think Ruben, didn't you send me something about that?
I don't know if it like went through or if it was.
Okay. It was just on the table.
I don't know. You live there, man.
Yeah, I mean, I just disregard the law. Believe me.
Yeah.
I was thinking if there's any part of this country that decriminalized, like Chicago is probably, on the top 10 where it needs to happen.
Yeah, all those big cities. So okay, it doesn't look like it passed, but it looks like it's something that there's a couple council members are trying to get through and get a bill going. But no, I haven't really seen it elsewhere yet. Like I was hoping it would kind of pick up steam, just kind of like the cannabis bills did. It was pretty rapid after like Denver hit, and then I mean there's such a financial like the financial proof behind it is such a powerful persuasive tool, obviously, that these don't really have currently. But yeah, no, I haven't seen much yet. I'm very hopeful though, and the best part about it, in my opinion, is that it's very easy to grow. You can look it up online how to grow. Buying the things are legal, and as long as you keep it low key, you never know what you can do in your closet. So
yeah. Oh yeah. That's my day job right now. I'm a cannabis grower.
Oh no shit.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I part owner in a medical cannabis dispensary here in Montana.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so I was like, man, if that train starts rolling, I think I'm going to be shifting careers and fill up a shop full of mushrooms, man. I would love to be part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I feel it's inevitable. I don't, when it comes to issues around the evolution of human consciousness, I just don't think there's any policy that can stand in the way of that. Like, I mean, if there was government at the time of human evolution from monkeys or apes to humans, like, I mean, could they have formed some council to, stop that from happening? No. Like, and so the consciousness awakening that comes with psychedelics, there's just no stopping it, and we talk about all the time, like with the psychedelic revolution in the 60s, while the drugs themselves didn't break through and well, I guess they were legal and became illegal, but still, it's like, while policy ended up being on the wrong, side of that, the lessons and, diet improved out of that psychedelic revolution. Meditation and yoga became more and more commonplace. Passivism and progressivism and all of these like kind of like positive, forward thinking, forward moving ideals came out of that psychedelic revolution. That's all part of, the evolution of human consciousness. And now, if you want to attach terminology to that, like ascension and different dimensions of consciousness of 4D, 5D, whatever, that's fine. But I think it all represents the same thing of like, there's an awakening and a shift happening, and psychedelics are a part of that. And like, I just, much like we've seen with cannabis legalization, like psychedelics are going to follow the same path, except probably faster. We always talk about that like cannabis did the hard work of coming out of prohibition, and it made the road a lot less rocky for psychedelics, especially mushrooms. They have the benefit of being natural, and if you look at the name of the bill in Oakland, it's decriminalize nature. Like that's the terminology, the neuro linguistic engineering involved in that campaign to get people to support that maybe aren't going to use those substances, is that it's natural. And I think mushrooms are going to be legal in much quicker time than it took cannabis to be.
Man, I hope you're right. Yeah. I hope you're right. Yeah, speaking about decriminalizing nature and people who may or may not use those, I was talking to my 83-year-old grandfather and about mushrooms and all that, and he lived in Santa Cruz, California during the 60s, where it was like, where he lived and traveled, it was like the hub of the beginning of, that revolution, that cultural revolution there. And, he loved the people that were involved in that. He worked for the state, so he didn't get too deep into it. But after talking to him about mushrooms, he was like all game for it. Like he wanted to try it. So 50% of his vision on the right-hand side is completely blacked out. And so like I told him, I said, look, like I don't know if this is safe for you. I mean, generally from what, they've found, it's pretty safe, but, with your condition and where you're at. So he took full responsibility for, and he did some reading about, the effects, and he took full responsibility for it. So what we decided on doing was 2 grams, which I thought was going to be, a nice mild experience for him. And it was, I was sitting there, he ate them, and it was about, 45 minutes went by, and he says, no, I'm not really feeling anything. And, I was beginning to think that it was going to be a dud. And then all of a sudden he started singing, and it was, 7 hours of hardcore tripping. I mean, he was in a whole nother place. Like he was completely disconnected. It was 6 hours before he came back to the point where like he could recognize that I was there, and I could help him get to the bathroom and that sort of thing. But it was such an intense experience for him. And when he came back out of it, like most of it, he said that, he had a vague recollection. Like it was all kind of like just one jumbled together kind of experience. Like there wasn't anything specific that came out, but he said that he felt so much lighter. I mean, as far as like emotionally, and just felt happier and more joy afterwards. And that was, I would say, probably 6 months ago. And I was talking to him the other day, and he said, yeah, I'm ready to do another one whenever you can make that happen for me. He's ready for another journey.
Oh, that's awesome. It's to be able to share that too, that's really great.
Yeah. Yep. It's a trip being around somebody who's, at 4 strokes, like he knows what the odds are, if another one is to hit, and the likelihood of having another one. So he's facing, like this transition, that is coming for all of us. We don't know when the heck it's coming, but to watch and to be able to talk with him, I'm really close with him. So to be able to talk with him and listen to his thoughts and his viewpoints, and to see how he's changing and approaching like this coming time. It's an intense experience. And to see that transition. Yeah. So I'm glad that, the mushrooms are, the mushrooms and Ram Dass are there to help him with it.
Yeah. My dad, he's coming towards the end of his life too. And he's had he's a really intelligent guy, but he's never, not even just drugs. It's not like he's never even done drugs, which he hasn't, but like, he's never done anything to be aware of his consciousness, let alone alter it. Like he's just kind of always been in his head, and always been very like controlling of his story of his life and, you know, his family's life and stuff like that. And now he's at this point where, like, you know, since he's retired, he's just not done anything. So his body's just like degraded. And all he does is sit in front of the TV and get upset about politics. And like, that's like the end of his life. That's how he's choosing to end his journey. And like, there's part of me that's like, I want to share a mushroom experience with him, but it's like, I don't know. There's something about it that like just tells me like it's too far gone almost, you know, like it wouldn't be as beneficial as I think it or want it to be. That like it would just confuse him and anger him more, and, you know, speed things up and whatever, you know, like and it kind of like I kind of thought about that. I don't know if you've ever heard of the books, The Brotherhood of the Screaming Abyss by Dennis McKenna. It's pretty good because it's like his account of growing up with Terrence and Terrence's life from his perspective, and which is really great because, like, you know, he obviously thinks he was a great person, don't get me wrong, but it's a very humanistic view of Terrence that is different from like the, you know, the idol that he's set up to be from anyone else who's wrote about him, or you know, even his own writings about himself and his experiences. But anyway, towards the end of Terrence's life, you know, after there was no more medical intervention for his cancer, like that was like their thought, you know, is like, well, you need a psychedelic trip or whatever. And like, it just didn't do anything. Like, it was like already like the part of his being that could be affected by that and any change that could be made was already gone. It was already past. You know, and I think that's one of the last chapters in that book, but it's like, it was one of the sadder parts of it because it's like, you know, we want to believe like these things fix everything, but they don't. And, you know, that's kind of where I've come with my dad is like, I'm not even going to like broach the topic because, you know, I don't think it's going to have the impact I want it to have, even if he was cool with it.
Yeah. Has he ever looked into like maybe like the DMT, the spirit molecule, that movie, or has he ever had any interest in that kind of thing?
No. You know, he's had friends that smoke weed like their entire life. Which I know that they do. I don't, and he does too, but I don't think he knows I know. And so, but he also like, he's never smoked weed. He has no interest in drug culture. He hates the drug war though. Like he's a lawyer or was a lawyer. And so he's, from a young age, before I knew like really anything about weed other than just like, oh, marijuana is this drug, it's illegal, people smoke it, and they usually live in trailer parks if they do. Like that was kind of like, sorry to anyone that lives in a trailer park, but I'm just saying, you know, where I was at when I was 10 or whatever. In the 80s too, let's put it that way. But anyway, I like, he was always like, it shouldn't be illegal, and it's ruined a lot of men's, you know, young people's lives because of it being illegal. And he's always had that point of view. That's coming from his understanding of the legal system and not substances and psychology and all that. But I bought him the book, and actually I want to ask Stan after this about, because he bought this book for his dad. But the Michael Pollan book, How to Change Your Mind. And I bought it for him and was like, after I listened, I had the audio book and was like, oh my God, like this book's awesome. It's great for the movement, the psychedelic movement. But also that was my thought, was like, my dad needs to read this. If there's any way that I'm going to broach the topic of psychedelics and his possible usage of them, I need to give him this book and he'll read it, because he reads books real quick. He has nothing to do all day. And, you know, like he reads, but he reads political books. Like he watches political TV and then he reads political books, and like that's his reality in his world. So I was like, I'd give him something else. He fucking lost the book. And I like, he was like, yeah, I don't know where it went. And it's like, he goes 4 places in his life. And like that book isn't in any of them. I don't know how the hell you lose a book when like you don't leave the same chair all day. And so like, that was my attempt to like kind of nudge him, you know? So like, I don't know, like I said, it just feels like a lost cause, but Stan, how, I know like your dad got that book for Christmas. How is there any feedback from that?
Yeah, well, first of all, maybe your dad is just lying and he's just tripping every day now and doesn't want to approach the topic with you. But no, so my brother got it for him, and I guess I was like nervous. We talked about this a little bit, but I was like nervous because it's one of those things. It goes along with anxiety and how it's such a bigger thing in my mind than, you know, what it actually is. And, you know, he opened it up and I feel like he was excited about it more than anything. Like we've prefaced this that he loves the author, and like loves his previous works and loves how in detail and, you know, firsthand accounts he gives. So, you know, he was reading it before we finished like opening presents, I noticed, which like we go around in a circle and, you know, youngest toldest, all that stuff. So that was a good sign. And, you know, him just making jokes about, yeah, oh, this is awesome. Like I'm going to be tripping acid here soon, like joking about it, obviously. But it was just like, it was welcomed with a great mindset that I didn't think would have happened. I guess I just have him in this like little nutshell since, you know, he was the disciplinarian of my life whenever there were drugs and he caught me with drugs or alcohol, you know? So I guess I kind of have him still in that shell. But I was just home actually the other day and it was me and my brother hanging out and he asked my dad like what he's been reading. I guess probably trying to like nudge him towards that conversation. He didn't bring up that book yet. But something I did realize that ever since, which is crazy because it's just a day in the infinite timeline of humanity, or whatever this is, of nature. January 1 came, and that was the legalization of recreational use of cannabis here in Illinois. And that topic, when I was home last, was like what you had for dinner. You know, it was that common. Like it was, and all it took was the flip of the law part of it. Then everybody felt comfortable talking about it, and it was so strange. Like I was like, "Where am I? Like, is it like I didn't really know what was going on?" But yeah. So like, I think like all it really is going to take, and Ruben, even for your dad, if you know, if he is in Ohio with you, if Ohio ever wisens up, and you know, gets it legal recreationally, then that might be all it takes. You know, like my dad as well is a lawyer, and I understand that mindset because it's what you're practicing every day, and it's like it's hard to separate that from your own individual good or bad, like legal and illegal. It's hard to separate that from your own individual good or bad. But it was just cool, like how free and open it was talking about it. And honestly, like I wouldn't be surprised if someday, you know, my mom gets him to try like a gummy with him or something. Like my mom's super interested in it, and you know, she was talking about it. And yeah, if anybody would be the one to do it, it would be her. And you know, she could be like, hey, I don't want to go this alone. Have this gummy with me, and I could see it happening, honestly. And then, as we all know, cannabis is the biggest gateway drug. So next thing you know, they're going to be doing all the mushrooms.
Yeah.
So.
Well, yeah. I mean, I suppose that my dad would be the same way with the legality, but then there's this situation happened where up until last year they had been New York residents. Like even though they're mostly down here most of the time, they kept their residence as New York. I don't know. I don't think it would be for tax reasons because like that's the highest taxes out of all their options. But They would go up there to vote. My dad's doctors were all in New York. Like they considered themselves New York residents, even though they were there a month out of the year. Well, New York, went medical, and it's some cockamamie bullshit that's even worse than Ohio's. I like the ability to access it and stuff is really messed up, and where they put dispensaries, like they had to be within so many miles of so many million people, otherwise they can't have dispensaries and stuff like that. But the area that we're from in New York was, Buffalo's big enough that there would be dispensaries there. And my mom was like, yeah, I'm going to try and get your dad, he'd obviously qualify whatever medical conditions they're looking for. And I'm going to get him to try to take it. He had been taking CBD and found some relief for like sleeping and,
Nice.
and being pain-free when he sleeps. So they were already like on that train with the CBD. And then she was like, I'm going to try to get him like some edibles. He won't smoke anything, but, and whatever. But then fucking some election was happening in Kentucky that like he cared about, and he switched his, like, he was like, well, I'm not going to be able to get a medical in New York because I'm switching to a Kentucky resident so I can vote this motherfucker out of office or whatever it was. It's like, come on, man.
Maybe it's not meant to be, man. It sounds like it might
So
not
close.
be meant to be.
It isn't, and it's like, they just, I don't know, that religion of politics, it's got its hooks in him fucking hard, and to the point where his own physical well-being is put on the back burner,
Yeah, I think like, well, hopefully within his lifetime it'll be federally legalized, and you won't even have to worry about what state he's in. But
Yeah.
I do think all it takes is like that first time, and like making sure you have a good experience the first time. But and I'm talking about cannabis in this regard, but splitting a 10 milligram gummy for your first time, like nothing's gonna hurt you if you're chilling at home watching TV and you got snacks. Like everything will go good, and then boom, that switches your mindset to like, wait, why am I viewing this as bad? Why was this illegal? And then that can snowball, especially when you're retired and there's not much else to do with time,
Yeah. No, I mean, I really want to slip him
dose
one
him.
of the one of the pills I've made, like with the CBD in it and stuff, because it's so mild. Like I know he's not gonna freak out. Like the worst thing to happen is he's like not gonna really notice it, but other than that, like I don't feel like it would be a bad experience. But I think he would like almost fake take it. Like he'd be like, yeah, I'll take it later, and then throw it out or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's that far down that hole. But I don't know. And it might be the legality. I'm not sure.
I was reading an article the other day that was talking about how cannabis use in the senior population is like rising exponentially.
Yeah, I mean, why wouldn't it be? Like,
mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think if you're towards the end, you got to start. If you're towards the ends of your life, like that's got to be the best time to start like questioning and investigating like the permanence you've set up in your life. Like if you're like, well, I've always thought weed's bad, but now towards the end of my life, everything's changing politically. Maybe that means in my life, it's, like you would think like everyone should have that kind of view, and obviously they do if the use is rising, but it's not all of them, I guess. And that's where my dad falls into that, So, I mean, I have to claim total ignorance. I didn't even know Montana was a medical cannabis state. How long ago did that happen? And what was like kind of the cultural thing that you felt? Because I really don't even have an idea of like, I just think of ranchers, but like, is it a real, conservative, old tough guy kind of culture in Montana, or are they pretty progressive?
Oh man, that's so Montana was actually one of the first states to have medical cannabis. It was 2004, I think, is when it first passed.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and so at that time, like it was, dude, I was just getting out of high school then, so I wasn't involved in it at that time, but it was kind of like what the politicians called it was Wild West, because like it was so open and easy. There were dispensaries popping up everywhere, and um, there was a lot of shady people in the industry doing shady things, and eventually, it's the feds came in and wiped out a lot of the big people in the industry, and some of the guys that were in the industry at that point in time are still sitting in prison and under questionable reasons. So it scared a lot of people in the business, and so it went totally quiet up until about 2014 when there was that bill that was slipped in. I don't know if I'm saying this right, but basically like it said that federal funds couldn't be used to interfere with states' medical cannabis systems. So like they couldn't send in the feds to deal with it. Mm-hmm. So at that point in time, it kind of started opening back up again. As far as like the culture here, back 2004, like Montana was definitely like, if you look at the majority of the state, I mean, there's only just over 1 million people in the entire state.
Wow.
And there's a lot of wide open spaces. So when you go over to the east side of the mountain range, like it's a lot of, it's a lot of ranchers and crops and, small communities, tight knit communities that don't want anything to do with cannabis. It's still the devil's lettuce. And then there are a few places over on the west side of the state, that are like up and coming, growing areas where like the state's just being flooded with people evacuating California and all the other terrible places to live right now. And so in these small, dense pockets, like it's definitely pretty progressive and it's changing. So I've seen it shift radically here, like to where, it's like you couldn't talk about cannabis. Like when I first got in the business, like I didn't want to tell anybody really that I knew, what I was doing. Like if somebody asked, I was like, I'm growing organic vegetables. Mm-hmm. But now it's to the point, like it's pretty accepted. Like it's, you can talk about it out in the open without getting, sideways glances.
Yeah. I think, and I'm saying this from someone that's never lived in the mountains, but I think the mountain culture, while it may be personally conservative, people that think it's devil's lettuce or whatever, there's still a, I guess libertarian kind of ideal of like, I don't give a fuck what anybody else does. Maybe not to the point where you support legalization, but you're not really very passionately against or for prohibition either, and then so when you have a state like that where like it's population centers and it's active, politically active populations are younger, college towns or whatever, it's pretty easy to get something like that involves personal freedom passed, from a policy perspective. I think that's one reason like Alaska was able to have recreational weed before most other places, is just because it's like I don't give a fuck, like I came up here to not worry about what the fuck other people are doing and have them not worry about me, and my perspective from never being in Montana would be like that's kind of the situation there around the culture of drug policy, I would think.
Yeah. I think it almost sounds like you have a very, very good grasp on it up here. I think that was a really good summation because personal liberty is definitely huge here.
Yeah. Well, like I remember, and it may have changed now, but wasn't Montana one of the states where like they didn't have open container laws for driving? Like you could drive with a road pop, like you couldn't be drunk, but you could be drinking a beer while you're driving.
Yeah. When I was a kid, that was still legal.
Yeah.
And for a while, we didn't have speed limits.
Right. Yeah.
Reasonable and prudent.
Yeah. Yeah, and so that's like mountain culture. I think that's why Denver has become such a like kind of progressive city like that is because it was easy to change the state laws because people outside of the city population centers like don't give a shit. Like it's like leave me the fuck alone and leave other people the fuck alone, you know? And so anything that like restricts freedom, kind of, if it can get numbers behind it, it passes pretty easy. You know, which is in a sharp contrast to where I'm living in Ohio. You know, it's like very much people give a shit about what people are doing. People put, and they may do this in Montana as well, but I mean, there's you can't go 50 miles in any direction without seeing a billboard that someone has paid to put up to remind you you're going to hell. You know, like I don't know if that exists in Illinois and Montana, if you guys have seen that, but you know, it's like that's a really common thing around here, and it's like people really give a shit about what other people are doing in Ohio, and you know, it doesn't surprise me that we've had such a hard time shaking free of cannabis prohibition in this state. I don't know how. I mean, being in the industry, I don't know how much you were aware of the recreational like voter initiative that we had in Ohio. Did you hear about that?
No.
So they collected enough signatures, and it was this group. I forgot what they were called, but they were all funded by like 10 different, you know, rich, either organizations or specific individuals. And they put together this whole signature campaign drive. They had a fucking tour bus with like a pot leaf mascot, or no, it was a bud. It was a marijuana bud, Buddy. And it was like a superhero. I'm
That's
not making
awesome.
this up. Yeah, like you can look, like you can look it up. Yeah, his name was Buddy, and he was like in a fucking like Superman outfit with a pot leaf on his chest, and he had a big head that was a nug, and went around and collected signatures, and they got enough signatures to put a voter initiative to legalize recreation, and we weren't medical at the time, to legalize recreational weed and allow home grow of up to 10 fucking plants. Anybody over 18 or 21 could grow 10 plants at a time in their house. But there was a thing in the bill that in order to qualify for the it was the first 10 commercial grow licenses would be awarded to the people who put up the money for the campaign, for the signature campaign. And everybody started they passed out this propaganda legislation of it's a monopoly, that these people are writing into law in Ohio that they're a monopoly and no one else can have a commercial grow. When it was the first year, like they had to establish the first commercial grows, but then there could be other licenses given out. But still, it was this term monopoly that got thrown around. And the state was split down the fucking middle of people that supported cannabis legalization, but hated monopolies and didn't want this monopoly. But they're all overlooking the fact that anybody that wanted could grow 10 plants in their basement, which is obviously more than enough for most people. And like, how is that a monopoly? You know, like Nestle sells water and you can't really start your own bottled water company, but that doesn't mean they have a monopoly on it. You know, like you could just get water, like, and so it was this awful thing. And then on top of that, to add insult to injury, the prohibition forces capitalized on this monopoly thing and put a bill on the same ballot that was confusing in the way it was written and the way it, like, you know, if you were for or against this issue, but it made it so that the Board of Elections had an override of any voter referendum that came on a ballot to determine if it would create a monopoly or not, with the sole discretion of the election board, and they could kick it off no matter how many signatures were on there.
Oh shit.
So the campaign, the anti-monopoly campaign, was also like telling people how to vote for this thing that changed the fucking constitution for the state constitution for Ohio, and has overreach over more issues than just cannabis legalization. Like, I mean, I don't know. I can't think of anything offhand, but anything that voters are like, we're fucking voting this. We don't care about the legislature. We're taking this into our own hands. The legislature can say, nah, that'll make a monopoly. Fuck you. And so that's what the ultimate thing was we didn't get any change in the cannabis policy. And now we lost some freedom to change policy through the voters and not the politicians. And yeah, and it was such a fuck up. And then what happened was those 10 rich people that everyone was against, that were, going to be a monopoly, they turned around and donated more money to all the campaigns of the legislature, and the House and Senate and governor passed a medical bill that made it so that the only growers for the medical were these 10 people. So they still built their facilities. They're still getting their money. And in fact, it's government they're tax subsidized now and tax free or whatever, because it's medical. So they made out in the deal. It's everyone else that lost.
Damn, that's such a sad story.
Yeah. And so now we are getting to point, there's dispensaries coming up and everything. But they made it like, I don't know how it is in Montana, but to open a dispensary in Ohio, you have to have you have to pay $100,000 for the application fee, which you don't get back and you might get declined. And then it is $200,000 a year to renew the license to have a dispensary. And you also, in order to qualify, there's a whole list of shit too, but in order to qualify, you have to have $1 million in liquid capital. So like the monopoly was just, we didn't have a choice to vote on it. Like, we actually had a choice to not have a monopoly, and we voted that down and got a monopoly. So all the dispensaries you see are all like corporations that are coming in from out of state and stuff like that.
That's so sad. When it started here in Montana, like when I first started, I think I paid $50 for my application fee and had to go in and get fingerprints and stuff, and that was it. I mean, and then every patient that came on, I had to pay a certain amount to, make them a patient, but it was really open and easy. And so like, when I first got into it, like it was a small businessman's dream to get into the cannabis business, because there was no heavy testing requirements. I mean, it was really simple. And then now over the last, how many years? The last 6-7 years now, it's changed dramatically. Like the state has been back and forth, and I had to shut down my business at one point, get rid of all my patients, kill all of my plants. And then 3 months later, they're like, oh, well, now you can start it again. And so, started back up, and then the entire process of the regulatory system and the bills that have been passed by the citizens, like it's just been a joke, because something will get passed by the citizens and then it gets completely changed or overridden. And what we've seen is a lot of outside money and large corporations coming in and influencing it. And so now what it's turned into is it's not quite as expensive as what you're talking about in Ohio, but it's getting there. It's going in that direction to where like an average person definitely can't just like jump into the business anymore, which is really unfortunate, because I mean it fueled. I mean there was a lot of guys, like I at the largest that mine ever was is I had when I was solos, I had 40 patients, but 40 people, I was able to operate a small grow and a delivery service and support my family, and it was a good thing. But
yeah,
that world is definitely gone, and I doubt we'll see that in many other states.
Yeah, I think, well, I hope that all that aspect that happens in a lot of states of just like capitalism taking over basically, and using, the leverage that capitalism has over policy and politics, as once it becomes federally like not a scheduled drug or descheduled to where it doesn't matter, and there doesn't have to be all these crazy laws. It'll kind of lose all that, it'll kind of even out, in that like it'll eventually just be a plant, or it'll be treated like alcohol, to where like, it's they have that like, well, this is still federally legal, so you're going to take whatever structure we set up for you, kind of scenario. But my ultimate dream to see with cannabis is like that humanity realizes like, God damn it, this is just a fucking plant. Like there doesn't need to be any policy towards it. It's a plant, it has a lot of usage. I hope I see a day where, hemp is the crop that farmers grow, because the way that the, capitalism and industry has like put a stranglehold on agriculture with growing corn and soybeans, that hemp becomes that alternative crop for farmers to grow because of its profitability and its, how much easier it is to grow and everything. And that like, that changes the way we view it as like, okay, yeah, this is this plant that can grow this drug, but it's also this plant is like amazing and everybody's growing it. It's everywhere. We can't tell what's hemp and what's cannabis and, whatever, like we can't like, and it just becomes just a plant, and that may not be happening very soon, but I think it's just kind of inevitable.
Well, what's crazy, man, is you talking about hemp. I just found, I heard this not too long ago. Right now, Montana is the largest hemp producer in the country. And just last summer, I was, I kind of live out in the country, and there's a bunch of, big farm fields where they grow a shit ton of canola. And I was on this little back country road, just maybe a mile from my house. I kind of walked back in there, and there was probably about 5-10 acres of hemp that they were planting as a test crop. So,
yeah.
It's taken off. And I have a bunch of family that lives over on the East Coast, and they're just saying how, all the fields that used to be corn now are turning into hemp. So I think that's, I think it's going to be sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Definitely. I think so. I like, I live close to Kentucky, and Kentucky like is all about hemp. And like their agriculture is switching over at a breakneck pace. And like you're also seeing every fucking strip mall, at least in Northern Kentucky, where I've driven around, has a goddamn CBD shop, and they're all like claiming like Kentucky grown hemp. Like it's like this like pride thing of like this was grown in Kentucky. Oh, and whatever. And I just think that'll expand. Kentucky's a very not progressive, pretty backward state. And to see that they're approaching it logically like that, it shows me that it'll happen anywhere almost, like that, like the number crunching takes over with that, at least, like you could take the whole, like, drugs are bad, okay, kind of situation out of the culture and be like, well, it makes so much more sense as a farmer who has to, pay my mortgage on all this equipment, that this crop is way more profitable and it's legal to fucking grow now. Like that's what I'm going to grow. And, and I think that'll just spread everywhere, but.
Well, yeah. And it's so useful. Like, I mean, I don't know the intricacies of hemp plastic, but like they're talking about biodegradable water bottles made of hemp plastic. Mm-hmm. And there's this, I don't know if you've seen this whole campaign recently where they're talking about like they're shaming and guilt tripping people for using single use plastics. Well, it's like, hey, like we're all not going to stop living just because, they're producing and making available, these terrible plastic products, but like to guilt us and shame us for using it. I think that's fucked. But like, if we can change over and make hemp produced plastic that's biodegradable, like shit, that changes everything. That's a game changer.
Yeah. Yeah, man, I definitely, I see a bright future ahead for all plant medicines, whether it's hemp or cannabis or mushrooms or, ayahuasca therapy centers or whatever. I think along with what we've been talking about, consciousness shifting and people waking up, like that's part of that process is the zeitgeist of society, just accepting that like nature won't run out of answers for problems that we can create, and I don't know. I just have a high hopes for it. And I think you share that, and so do your listeners and stuff. So, we're getting pretty late here, man, but I just wanted to thank you for coming on. This has been an awesome talk.
Dude, I have loved this, and having a chance to talk with you guys and connect with your audience. I'm really grateful that you invited me on and had a chance to talk.
Yeah.
And as in regards to what you're saying, this hope for this bright future, I love that. I love that, and I try to stay connected to that as often as I can. And sometimes it's difficult, especially if you pay attention to the news and all the crazy stuff that's happening in the United States today, or even overseas, depending on wherever the listeners are at. Sometimes it's difficult to hang on to that, but I think you look overall at the trajectory of where we're going, and I think there are definitely good things coming.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and it can be easy to get overwhelmed with all the stuff that's happening around you. And I think like we just all have to take solace in knowing we're doing what we can and influencing what we can. And that's what, Stan and I are doing with this podcast and what you're doing with your channel. And I definitely, we'll link your channel and we'll link the video when you interviewed me. And I definitely urge everyone that listens to our podcast to check out your channel. And, hopefully we'll do this again sometime, man.
Epic.
As always, thank you for listening to the Help Find the Others podcast. Please don't forget to check out our Discord server to connect with our growing community. The link to join can be found in the description. And if you feel like donating to our channel to help us grow, a link to our Patreon can also be found in the description, as well as some cryptocurrency wallet addresses. If you would like to be a guest on the podcast or have any questions about these topics, please email helpfindtheothers@protonmail.com. If you would like to leave a voicemail or a text message question for a future episode, Stan, what's that number again?
567-233-1335.
Okay, guys, thanks again. And until next time, let's help find the others.